Sorry about that. My phone cut out. Um, where I was at, yeah, the girl that I met, she was very bitter. She was very angry. She wasn't like me, but I wanted to show basically what it was is I wanted to show my dad that hey, this is how you raise a child, And she had a child, and I loved her son. Her son was ended up being a great kid at 7 years old. Um, and hopefully that's because of what I did, what I showed him, because he didn't learn it from his mother, because his mother was very, very rude and angry and bitter, and and I'm sure she had her reasons for being this. I mean, she was the middle child, and maybe she didn't get treated the way she wanted to be treated, or however else, whatever else excuse that she had or whatever. But she, like I said, she was angry all the time, and she there was times that where she tried to make it look like I hurt her when she knew I would never hurt her, and everybody else who knew me, like my neighbors and all that, would know that I would not hurt her, because of who I was, because of my morals, because of the light, the light in my head. I mean, I never could hide that. Now that's always been there, and I think that's the reason why she got with me, is because she saw the light and she wanted to take advantage of it, and that's just the simple truth of it. She wanted the money. She wanted me to be a father to her child and all that. And so she was with me. But while I was at this job, I started to, I met a guy, and the guy was a bodybuilder, and her father was a bodybuilder too. So it was really simple for this to happen. But and then the guy that I met at the work, he decided, or he started showing me, okay, this is how you build your body, because I was still a skinny guy. I didn't know I was a hard gainer, little guy. So, and I think she liked that. She liked that because she could control that. But over a couple of years, I actually gained a lot of weight and gained a lot of body strength because of this guy that I knew. And this guy, he was cheating on his wife and all kinds of stuff. He was not a good man. He would, brag about it and all this kind of stuff. And I was telling him, hey, you got a family, man. You got a wife. You got kids. You don't need to be doing this stuff. And he just continued to do it and brag about it and all that. He was real happy. But anyways, I so when that relationship basically finally got over with, because after 7 years, and I was bulky, I was muscular at that point, because that man had showed me how to bodybuild, and I learned it, and I learned all the skills, and I did it, and I gained like 60 pounds from what I was at. I was at like 190, like 5% body fat. I was just built, because I went, too far with it. I went way too far with it, because, I thought, oh, well, this is going to make people see me. And, well, it made her see me, and she was like, oh my God, I can't control him anymore. So basically she became more irate and more evil and more this and that. And, basically I just couldn't take it anymore. She was turning me into someone I wasn't, because I was defending myself. I was saying, hey, this is crap, you're doing this things you're doing to me. I do all this stuff, I work, I take care of your son, I buy him Christmas presents, and I take care of you, and everything else, and she never appreciated any of it. And then of course, whenever I got older, or when I got bigger, she was like, oh, I can't control him anymore. So then she tried to control me with anger, and that was just like my father, which, it was just like irateness all the time. And that was just like my father. And so, of course, I couldn't handle that. So basically, eventually, we ended up not being with each other. I was only with her the time that I was with her because of her son, basically because I knew he needed me. It was just that he needed me. Otherwise, he would end up like her, just like my dad, would have ended up. But anyways, so we split up from each other. At that point, I started to learn about God and Jesus and all that, and I read the Bible, the whole thing, because I was like, okay, there's got to be something going on with this, there's something happening because the the muscles that I got and everything, it got me attention, but it got me the wrong attention. I mean, it got me. There were people who gravitated towards me and women that gravitated towards me, but they were just not the right women. They were just they were there just for my body. They didn't care about anything about me. And anytime I showed my personality, like who I was, like the light, they were like, "Oh, well, this doesn't match." Well, it didn't. It didn't match, because those people, who are big and muscular and all that, they have certain lifestyles that they live, and it wasn't my lifestyle. It wasn't who I was. It wasn't what I was taught, and, and so that just didn't work out. So, like I said, I started reading the Bible and doing all that kind of stuff, and I continued to work out. And basically, I had a vision from God, about doing something, I thought, and it was. So I took visions of that. I drew things, the visions that he gave me, and I actually tattooed them on my body to remind me of that's what I'm supposed to do, and I never supposed to go back to what I was doing before. I was supposed to do that now. Well, I took it as, okay, I need to help children like myself who had these problems and all that and had parents like this and, who were hard gainers and couldn't gain weight and all this kind of stuff. Teach them about nourishment and teach them about, building their bodies and building themselves. And then I was like, well, I'll throw God in there as well, because I know a little bit about that, and I'll just call it Little Jim Rat's Ministries, so, because it was for kids or young people, and it was, building their bodies and building their souls at the same time. That's what I told myself, and that's what I advertised. So I started doing that, and I actually did end up, helping a few kids at it, but it was just, I didn't know what I was doing, Of course, I knew what I was doing under the light because the light had always been with me. So it was easy for me to teach about that. But the bodybuilding, I taught them how to do it, and it was fine, and all that because I knew quite a bit about that just because of what I've been through. But I didn't know the business side of it. I didn't know the donations, the business side of it, and all that kind of stuff. So I tried to build it myself, I was like, okay, well, I need to do this in order to get it to go. So I was like, I need to advertise. So I was like, okay, I'll get shirts and, bands and, lanyards and all this kind of stuff. And I'll advertise it, to schools and all this kind of stuff. Well, I did that and nothing came of it, I wasted, all this money got wasted on this stuff, So, that ended up failing. And by this point, I had basically, spent all of my money, everything, sold. I spent everything I had, going towards this ministry and towards this bodybuilding, business and ministry that I thought, was where God wanted me to be. So I basically sold everything and went straight for that, and then of course that ended up failing. So I ended up being, and it wasn't because God, felt it. It was just because it just wasn't what He wanted me to do. There was, I'll find out later that what the actual dream was about and what it was supposed to be. But so I did that. So I sold everything, and went towards this, so in my mind, I was selling everything to go to God, to become one of his disciples, and that's just, that's what I did, is I sold everything and worked on little gym rats, um, and just a little side note is, God has tried to keep me out of the world for a long time. He's done lots of things that keeps me out of the world. One of the most prominent to keep people from gravitating towards me and to keep me on the outsides of everything is that, he made me start going bald at, 18 years old. And by the time I was 28, 27, I look like this, And it's not really a very, it's not appealing to a lot of people, And so that helps him keep me out of the world. That I know now, it helped me throughout my life to keep me out of this world, and so he's still trying to keep me out of this world, but I'm trying to go into the world. I'm trying to do things for people. I'm trying to make something of myself. And so I ended up, getting a roommate because I had gotten out of my apartment and I was done there. Because I had sold everything, my bed, my TV, everything. I sold it all. So I ended up living in one of my sister's friend's house who had a pool. Who was in a decent house and had a room to rent, and I went and rented that room. And, this man, he was a good man on the inside, but he had a lot of the world in him, I mean, he had a pool and he had a boat and he had all this stuff, and it was, and he, ended up giving me a job whenever the Little Gym Rats things failed, because I went over there while I was still doing that, and he was like, yeah, do your dream, and then, if it doesn't work out, then I'll give you this, because he was an electrical supervisor, at a company, and he ended up getting me a job there once the Little Gym Rats failed. So I got a job there, and I did fine there. There was nothing wrong with that. Did lots of jobs for them, and like I said, they had a pool, and I became really good at water volleyball and things like that, and I started to live a life, a normal life, in the world, so God allowed me to live a life in the world a little bit, let me go off in that world, but like you said, the light was still there. People could still see the light. So nobody still gravitated towards me. They were drinking beer, smoking, doing all this kind of stuff, smoking cigarettes, which I smoked. I got into that addiction. I smoked from about 16 all the way up to 30 years old. I smoked, and I stopped smoking whenever I got out of the marriage, or whenever I got away from my first wife, I stopped smoking and went straight to God, I mean, that, and just did, and stopped everything, stopped drinking, all that kind of stuff, because I drank. I mean, I tried to get into the world many times, in my life. I tried to get out there and drink. Of course, the light was always saying, don't drink, don't do it, don't intoxicate yourself. The demons will get in there. And, of course, I mean, they did, And I made a couple of friends who drank and stuff like that. And this one young guy who was, basically emulating me, for my but it was for the wrong reason, and he was a drinker. He had this little apartment, and he was drinking, and he had me come over and drink and all that kind of stuff, and so, and I made a lot of mistakes when I drank, and stuff like that, and I wasn't a very good drinker, because I didn't drink that much, and I didn't enjoy drinking. I just did it because that's what the world was doing. That's how I felt I would fit in, is if I drank, I even tried, weed and things like, back, a couple of times, but it never stuck. That light voice was like, no, you can't do this, and it was really sad, because the guy that I was doing with was a friend, that I've had my entire life, you know, because he was a friend of my parents. His parents were friends with my parents, and you know, he got into this stuff, and he was raised by a normal family, and actually ended up, you know, becoming a normal teenager. He played soccer and all this kind of stuff, and so he was a soccer star, you know, and he had this life, and this is what he did in this life, and you know, I had to go be part of this life when he got older. You know, when we were kids, it was fine because we were just kids. We were just playing and all that kind of stuff. And whenever I went over to his house, it would be the only escape I have from my family, and to see a real family, how a real family should act, you know, and how a real mother and a father should act, and, you know, the pride, you know, of the compassion and the love and the pride of working and all that, you know, for their family, and providing and building, you know, a life and all that kind of stuff. I saw at his house, and I actually did enjoy being over there. But when we got to be teenagers, he got into all this stuff, and the only way I could be around him is if I did this stuff, and I tried doing it, and it did, like I said, it didn't work. It didn't work. The light was like, no, you can't do that. No, I mean, it's just like, no, you know, Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit was like, no, you can't do that. So I ended up, you know, getting away from him. So anyway, so back to the roommate I had. Okay. Everything was going good. I almost got another girlfriend, but like I said, she was looking for a different thing. She wasn't, you know, the light didn't work. You know, she liked partying and going to bars, and, you know, and going dancing and all this kind of stuff. And it, you know, so it was Texas, so, I mean, you know, boot scooting, dancing, and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I had never been taught any of that, you know, and so that's what they wanted to do. That's what she wanted to do, and then that's just not who I was, you know. So that didn't work out. So eventually, like I said, the work's going fine, and that's going fine, and I'm having fun at the pool parties and all that kind of stuff. It's just, but, you know, nobody is gravitating towards me. Nobody can really see who I am, and, you know, my roommate, the guy who owned the house, you know, he, you know, was good to me. He was nice to me, but, you know, he was a really strong character. Let's just say that, you know. But he had a good heart. He did. He had a good heart. And I actually ended up getting him to where he would marry this girl that he, you know, just didn't want to marry. He wanted to, you know, play around and, you know, go be around with all these girls, and, you know, bring them to his pool party and take them out on the boat and all that. And he didn't want a true relationship. And, you know, and I met who this girl was, or this lady that, you know, loved him, and he wouldn't, you know, give her the time of day. And I actually got them together, and it actually was my downfall because they ended up getting a house together in a they ended up getting a house together, you know, and they left that house, you know, and they went and lived on a lake somewhere, you know, but it was away from where I could work, so I wasn't able to go. So I lost my place where I was living, so I had to find another roommate because I still didn't have enough money to get an apartment. And so I had to get a roommate. Well, I wrote on there that I was a good Christian man, and I wanted, you know, I wasn't a partier, and I didn't want to, you know, drink, and I didn't want to do drugs, and I didn't want to do all these things on the ad. And then I got a reply back, and it was from a lady. So I went to go see, and she lived in a house. It was still in Fort Worth. And when I went there, I found that, you know, when I first saw her, she was like, oh my gosh, she's like a emo. She's like, you know, got black. Everything's black. You know, she's got black hair. She's got black clothing, all this kind of stuff. But then when I talked to her, she knew a lot about God. She knew a lot about the Bible. She knew verses, all that kind of stuff. So the God part of me was like, okay, there's a good little flag there. Okay, she knows God, and she'll like you for being close to God. Um, and it was really strange because she was a lot older than me. She was older than me. And I was a bodybuilder. I was big and muscular, and she was not. She was a little bit over. She was overweight, and so I was like, well, I can help her. I can. She has God in her, and she so I can help her. Well, so I did. I moved in. I said, okay, I'll move in because of the God, and we had a lot of conversations about God. A lot about Jesus, and not Jesus, but God. And she, eventually I found out she thinks she was a prophet, and she spoke to God, and she had, ways that God told her things. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. That's good because I'm going toward God. That's who I want to be around. So I did that. And, we ended up getting married. She told me that we're supposed to be married, because I was, I was living there, and if I didn't marry her, then she was going to kick me out. And she said, God said we're supposed to be married, that it's ordained for us to be married. And I was like, saying, right around that time, it turns out that I needed to stay there because my job had gone to Dallas, and I wasn't able to go to Dallas. So I was like, okay, well, all right, well, and I stayed there, and I actually did some training through her after we got married, through a company that she had, which was that she had made, which was Well with Life, which was supposed to be a counseling company, but I never saw her counsel anybody. So I started training people through that, and I actually did train a couple of men through it, and helped them. And then I trained a young boy, about 15 years old, 16 years old, through it, and helped him, with their body and spiritually, because I was still doing that. I still had God in me, and the light was, shining, and I needed to tell them spiritually too. So I did that, and we ended up doing some other things, to make money and stuff like that, until I went back to electrical work. And then I did electrical work, and then made some money, and we actually improved the house that we were in. And after we improved the house that we were in, I found out that she didn't own the house, that she was renting the house. It was a rent to own situation. And I had, and we had improved the house quite a bit, and it was like, well, we just did all this for this other guy, so the owner of the house, and she was like, oh, well, I'm renting to own it, so it'll be fine. I'll own it. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. That's fine. It was fun what we did, building the house and all that, but I spent a lot of money on it, a lot of money that I had earned. And she was making a little money too. She wasn't working, but she was making a little money. But anyway, so we went along all that, and we actually did get a gym membership and all that, and got her into a gym, and she started losing some weight, and she was getting stronger, and I got her to stop taking all of her medication and all that kind of stuff. And I found out later that she had black, and she was wearing all black because her sister had died. And she was in a mourning state at the time, and her daughter had just left and all that. Well, she had kicked her out, but she had just left because she was a drain on her. She was the same way, didn't want to work, all that kind of stuff. And, she only had the money that she had coming in, so it wasn't very much, and her daughter was taking all of her money. So she basically eventually just said, okay, that's it, you're done, and I came in like a month after that, I found out later. Well, we went on like that for a while, and then it came to the point where that guy who owns the house decides, okay, I have to sell it. I made a bad deal somewhere and I have to sell it. And, of course, we made all these improvements to it because he's going to sell it for more. And she was like, well, I'll buy it. And she was like, okay, well, the original price was this. And he's like, well, and she was like, and he was like, no, I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna sell it for more. You'll have to pay this. And we were like, well, she was like, well, I don't have that much money. I can't buy that. And so he's like, okay, well, I'll sell it out from underneath you. You need to get out. So we lost our place to live again. It was either go to Dallas, which is I was being transferred over to a children's hospital to right about this time. I had finished the other job. It was done. And my uh, experience and building panels and electrical and all that, was needed in this children's hospital. And then I went and got all the IDs and everything, and I was ready to work there. I was actually gonna not even worry about driving to Dallas because it was a good place to work because it was a children's hospital. It's what saved my life when I was younger. I figured it was God, and then she was like, well, we can't get a place in Dallas. We can't afford it, and we're not going to get one in time, and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, well, my daughter is leaving where she is and in Nebraska and going to be with her children. So we can go live there. And it's a little bitty house, and it's we can rent to own it just like this one, and she was renting to own it, and the people that owned it are real good people. And I was like, all right, well, we'll try that because I agree we weren't going to be able to find a place in Dallas. It would have been taking a miracle, which God may have done a miracle, but at that time I wasn't high and up in that faith like that, at that time. So we went to Nebraska.